Hi, everybody, and welcome to our second session of the day. My name is Kara Wiley. I'm on the UAA committee, and I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. After she's done at the end, I'll make a couple of little announcements for everyone, so stay on for a little bit. We have announcements for next week. But our speaker today is Erin Bergeron from Utah State University. She's going to be talking to us about how academic advisors can rock their campus OKRs, or utilizing objectives and key results to strengthen your advising services. So Erin, take it away.
Okay, I'm so excited to be here with everyone today, so thanks for joining us. Just a couple of things at the beginning is I've had the opportunity to present on OKRs quite a bit throughout this past year, which has been a great experience to share with others how we're using objectives and key results in our office to help with our student services and goal setting. There is a lot of information that goes along with OKRs, and I'm going to try my best to provide everything that I can today to you. But at the end of this presentation, I will have up my contact information, and I am more than happy to connect with you, whether it's via email or in an appointment, if you guys have additional questions beyond today's presentation. And then we can kind of go from there. So just a brief outline of what we're going to be kind of reviewing today is what objectives and key results really are. And so I'll refer to them quite often by their nickname, which is OKRs. We'll be talking about a brief history of those and where they kind of came from, what brought them to our advising center, and how we've started to utilize them in the office and the impact that it's made, and really talking about the different skills that you may utilize in order to create your own OKRs, both professionally and personally, if that's something that you're interested in. So the really important thing to start off with is asking yourself, what is your why? Why are you at work? Why are you getting up every day and going into the office as an academic advisor and supporting students on your university or college campus? When you understand what your why is, it really helps you to be more intentional in what those OKRs are going to be for you as an individual and for your team. So this is a photo of John Dewar. He wrote a wonderful book called Measure What Matters, and it's all about OKRs. This is a book that was introduced to our team about 3 years ago now. We were asked to read it and really consider implementing it within our advising and career services here at Utah State University in the Huntsman School of Business. It was a really interesting read talking about how OKRs really can be a simple goal setting system that is both measurable and it is meaningful to you in whatever it is that you do. So John Dewar actually in 1975 got an internship with Intel, and he met a man by the name of Andy Grove, who is considered the father of OKRs. And that's where John really learned about OKRs and how they function. And it made a huge difference and impact both for the Intel Corporation, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on in this presentation, as well as for John Dewar himself, who went on to share this skill of OKRs with other companies such as Google, the Gates Foundation, and really OKRs, even though he focuses on businesses, can be utilized in all areas of service, and especially in academic settings. So really understanding the objectives of what an OKR is to recognize that OKRs have a specific target. And I will be giving some examples of that. They really target on just a handful of things. OKRs is not like when we take our typical goal writing, you know, we jot down a bunch of things that we'd like to be doing and then we stick it on the bulletin board and it starts to gather dust. It's really narrowing it down to 2 or 3 items that you want to target within a quarter, maybe a semester, an academic year, in our case as academic advisors, and then finding a focus on that. OKRs are really useful as you do quarterly reviews, and that can be with an OKR shepherd. So someone that you connect with and you kind of review those OKRs with, see how you're doing. They're like your accountability partner when it comes to the OKR world. But you can also do that review with yourself. You know, you can pull out your OKRs, you can sit down on your own quarterly review and say, how have I been doing on this? Is this something that I want to keep rolling forward? Is it something that I've stretched a little too far and maybe I need to pull back? And so really recognizing where you are in the goal setting and being an active participant regularly in those goals. So OKRs are not what we would call a one-man show. It's not just you and a piece of paper and your pen writing down your goals. OKRs are all about breaking down silos and starting to build relationships outside of your own comfort zone and maybe within your own academic center, because your OKRs are really not just about you as an individual in academic advising, but you're creating those specific goals to help provide better advising services for the students that we work with, for your advising team that you're a part of, and in the big picture, the university and the college as a whole, in creating student success far beyond their time with us and beyond graduation. So a typical OKR cycle, which of course can, like most things, kind of fluctuate in and out of that, but it often sticks to this cycle, is that you're going to start brainstorming what you want those OKRs to do. And this should be something that you're visiting at least annually, if not quarterly. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that when I do my example. You really want to communicate your OKRs. So OKRs should be out there for the world to see. So in our office, I have my office door has a window right below it, and I stick my OKRs right there where my students, where professors, other faculty, my supervisor, my colleagues, they can come by anytime and they can see where I've set for myself as my goals at this time, and they can help to keep me accountable and they can check in on that. What's really great about communicating your goals is that someone should be able to walk into your office anytime and say, hey, Erin, what are you up to? And I can tell them what I'm doing. And if that person then turned around and said, how does that relate to your OKRs out on the door? I can have an answer for them because I'm becoming more intentional and being more mindful of my time and the time of others and the goals that I'm setting. They should be able to be tracked. So it's very hard as academic advisors. We definitely work in a qualitative industry, but we need to start providing quantitative information to show others above us or those that do funding for us what it is that we really are doing as academic advisors. And so you always want to find a way to quantify your OKRs. And then again, doing your regular check-in, reflecting on how you're doing. Have you met the goal? Are you ready to stretch further? And that's kind of where that cycle it runs. So the O in OKR stands for your objectives, and this should be the item that you want to achieve as part of your goal. Your O or objective should definitely be something that's meaningful and inspiring to you as an academic advisor and the work that you're doing and helping to stretch you beyond your comfort zone in being able to dream big and serve your students. But they also need to be able to be achieved within 3 to 5 key results. The really sweet spot that John Dewar will talk about in his book, Measure What Matters, is really narrowing it down to 3 key results that you're focusing on to help you reach that objective within your OKRs. And then the KRs, which is the key results, is really about how you're going to achieve that specific objective in the time frame that you set for yourself. So the key results need to be specific. You need to give details not only for yourself, but for others that may review your OKRs or come by and check your door. Making it measurable, so putting that quantitative on there, really making it something that challenges you and takes you out of that comfort zone and helps to push you in your learning and growing as an academic advisor. You want to make sure that it's really going to help achieve the results that you're seeking for the objective that you set for yourself. When I mentioned that you should have 3 to 5 KRs, the same goes for your objectives. You don't want to push yourself too far. Your OKRs typically should just be able to fit on one piece of paper when you print them out. And so you're looking at about 3 objectives that you might be working on for the quarter or for that annual academic year as well. Some questions that I'd love for you guys to ponder as we proceed in this presentation is, how do you think that using OKRs is going to help you strengthen your academic services? What's in the improvements that you specifically want to see? We've had a long year this year, as we all know, and there's lots of room to think about what worked and what didn't work. What are we going to bring back to the office that we had to walk away from before the pandemic? And what do we realize isn't very essential and we can bring new tools in? So what is it that you're looking for your services? And then what have you learned during this past year that's really going to help you shape your own personal OKRs? So some of the classic OKR writing traps that we seem to fall in is that we want to stick with all the old ways of goal setting that we've grown up with throughout our lives learning about, right? We really have a struggle in recognizing what we should really commit to versus what we're aspiring to do and how do we get there, right? You don't want to treat these as a business as usual kind of goal setting activity. It really needs to be something that you're passionate about, you're excited to jump into, and it's really going to make sense for you as an individual academic advisor, for your team within your advising office, and even beyond that, because you want to continue to build and stretch and open the doors and take down the boundaries that we sometimes have in academic advising in the relationships that we have across campus with faculty and other staff members. You don't want to be sandbagging. Sandbagging is, so I'm from the South, and so I grew up with hurricane season, and so this really is a great visual for me, is to think about how the storm is coming and you start to border up the windows and you fill the sandbags and you're starting to pile them up, preparing for the disaster to come. You don't want to be setting goals that are you looking for the disaster moments that might come in the goals that you're setting, or the disaster moments you might be looking at in the new academic year. You want to take a step back, and instead of looking for the negative that might be headed your way, look for the innovation and the positive opportunities to be able to set goals that are going to really shape where your advising services head, that you can build on, not preparing for the worst. So I'm going to give a sample of an OKR. This was from my first OKR go round, and this is something I'm going to say about OKRs, especially because, again, there's a lot of information we go over today, and that's really recognizing that this is a learning process. And if you get a hold of the book Measure What Matters and you really bust out that highlighter and start reading, you're going to recognize even in that book that he talks about the learning process of knowing that you're not going to get your OKRs perfect the first go round. That's part of why it's important to have an accountability partner, whether it's a colleague or your director, to help you kind of shape where you go with those. And then as you become more comfortable and used to the process, it's a lot easier for you to adjust things as you go along. So in our academic advising center, we actually are the only college on our campus at USU that has our own career development team currently. And so we work very closely with career specialists within our office as academic advisors. When we first started utilizing OKRs, even though we got along well, we were all in the same office, we considered ourselves part of the same team, we really didn't understand what each other did in our roles. So career specialists didn't quite understand what was happening behind the door in an academic advising appointment, and vice versa with advisors and our career specialists. And so I really want, as one of my objectives, to create a career-centered culture for our students to help prepare them beyond graduation. Because I have a personal philosophy and belief that it's not really about their diploma. They're going to work hard and they're going to earn that degree, but they should be asking themselves every semester, how is what I'm doing right now preparing me for my future career after graduation? And so I wanted to create that environment for them. And so one of them was to collaborate with a career specialist within our office to help increase the number of students that were utilizing her and her services. And so in part of that process and in setting these goals, we shadowed each other for a few days to see how each other function in our roles. And then I was better able to help promote career services within our office to our students. And we really did see an increase in the amount of students who were first term or first year students that were seeing their career specialists. We ran the numbers, which is here for you to view, because who doesn't love to have some data, right? And so for us, you'll see in our student enrollment, this was during the 2017-18 academic year. So we had 763 students in the program that I advised for, and of that, only 88 students went and saw their career specialists. And I was just like, we've got to be able to do better than that. And then OKRs was introduced to our team. And so the following year, even though my caseload kind of dropped slightly, we were able to increase the number of students from 88 to 221 students within a short period from March 15th to May 21st that went in and saw their academic advisor, their career specialist. And so we saw this and it was really exciting, and I wanted to keep pushing to get more and more students in, and of course COVID hit. And so we did see a slight decrease, but even though that situation came and it felt like a barrier in the beginning, we realized that we could really shift what we were doing with that particular OKR. And so even though students weren't traditionally coming in to see the career specialist at that time period in our history, we were able to take all the information that we had already collected in promoting our students and seeing the career specialist, and we started a calling campaign. And within just a few weeks, we called 100% of students in the Huntsman School of Business to check in with them to see how they were doing with the transition to online learning due to the pandemic. And so even though it really shifted how things were happening, we were able to let those students know that both the career specialists and the academic advisors were still here for them. And then after that campaign went through, we saw a huge increase of how many students were taking advantage of phone and Zoom appointments. And so it really did have a positive impact. So before we jump into OKR superpowers, I just want to check in and see if there's any questions.
No questions so far, but there is a little bit of a lag. So if they have any questions, I'll let you know, Erin.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to talk about OKR superpowers. A good OKR has the best superpowers on hand. It's really all about being focused and committed to the priorities that you have within your academic advising services, really connecting with the team outside of your own office, tracking your accountability, and stretching for the amazing within your organization. So we're going to just kind of touch base on each OKR superpower, and then I'm going to share a story about how Intel really rocked the OKR superpower piece of this. So the first thing, of course, is your focus and commitment. What is your priority? As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you definitely want to have someone that's your OKR shepherd, that person that's your designated person that you check in with. You kind of run your OKRs by them and see if they kind of make sense. And for me, that's my direct supervisor here within my advising center. And she's great. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready to update our OKRs currently. And I called her the other day because I knew exactly what I wanted for a key result, but I was having a hard time finding the wording and really quantifying it. And so I knew without hesitation I could check in with her because she was my shepherd. Again, you want to only commit to 3 to 5 objectives, and then within those objectives, 3 to 5 key results, with 3 being your sweet spot number. Really looking for how to leverage your performance. It's okay to learn what it means to be an essentialist and to know how to gracefully turn down opportunities versus what you accept, and your OKRs can kind of help you to shape that and start to really feel empowered to be able to say, you know, that's a really great project. It doesn't really fit with what my personal goals are right now for the team, but you know, so-and-so might really be interested in this project instead because it aligns with theirs. And you know, really again, making sure that you're pairing the qualitative with the quantitative within academic advising. You definitely want to align and connect with your team. So of course, my hope is that we all get along well with our academic advising colleagues, right? But you again want to go beyond your guys' little area or your silo, as they're called. We want to start smashing those silos. We have found through using OKRs, we started off in our advising center, and then within the following year, the entire college read the book, and it really started to make a difference. Those that embraced OKRs, that really saw the vision and the innovation behind OKRs, started to really reach out, and we started to break down the barriers and have better relationships with faculty and staff, and really knowing how to meet the goals that we all share in essence for our students in being successful. You really want to be comfortable with the give and take, with constructive criticism or suggestions that others might have as you're shaping your own OKRs. But remember at the end of the day that you are the one that personally owns those, and that you know yourself best and what you're going to be able to do well to achieve what you've set for yourself. It's okay to revise. It's okay to drop things that you had on there. Just make sure that when you're doing that, it makes sense, right? Sometimes we're ready to give up really quickly, and when we shouldn't. For instance, instance, there's an individual for YouTube, and he set his OKRs, and it was when YouTube was in its infancy, and he had set a goal that they were going to get so many views within a certain set of time, and he really stretched it out there. It was like 200,000 views, which doesn't seem like anything in today's world of YouTube, but in the early years, that was a big deal. And he set it as a quarterly goal. He set his number, it was quantitative, and the goal came, and he didn't hit the KR. He didn't achieve his objective, and he could have easily been like, well, that stinks, I'll just lower the number. But instead, he pushed again for another quarter, and the second time, he didn't achieve it. And so he could have easily given up at that time, but instead for the third quarter, he not only rolled that OKR into his third quarter, he increased the number of views that he was going to aim for. And by the end of the third quarter, not only had he reached his goal, but he exceeded it, and the company really took off and began to grow. And he never gave up on what that objective was and the key results that he was utilizing to reach that. And it really made a difference for him in the long run. Really making sure that you track for accountability. You know, you want to build a culture of accountability. That's where it comes in handy, putting your OKRs out where your students and your colleagues can see what you're working on. Really feeling comfortable in, you know, making, again, as I mentioned, appropriate revisions to those OKRs, but always making sure that your most up-to-date OKRs are out for anyone in the world to see, because it helps you to feel more accountable and own that goal for yourself. You really shouldn't ever attach an OKR to an extrinsic award. There should be nothing related to your OKRs, not a promotion at work, not getting a raise on your annual paycheck. There shouldn't be, you know, gifts and prizes attached to that. When we do that to our goals, which I know seems very opposite of what we learn about goal setting, but when we add the stringent reward to a goal, it now becomes about that reward and really reaching for that, and you stop focusing on why you even set the OKR in the first place and what you're trying to achieve. It should be something that is very much an internal celebration and an achievement rather than attaching it to something tangible that you're just working towards. A really great example of that is that our university has a Be Well program, and so we can earn a bonus in our fall and our spring semesters, and you have to do all these things to achieve that reward, right? And sometimes it's really easy within the semester to lose focus of why you're even doing the healthy activities, because you're like, I just gotta get my steps in so I can make it to that bonus, right? And it really loses the meaning and the things that could lift you from that experience. And so don't do that to yourself in your goal setting. Really stretch yourself for amazing. In the Huntsman School, we have a motto, and it's to dare mighty things. Theodore Roosevelt coined that motto, and it really comes from a speech that he gave where he's teaching about how if we stay within our comfort zone, that's great. You're going to be okay, but you're going to miss out on a lot of life and a lot of opportunity if you're not willing to step outside of that comfort zone and really stretch for the amazing and to really dare those mighty things within your life. And that can be had as an academic advisor. We can really stretch ourselves to be a better advisor today than we were yesterday, and to provide services that are filled with meaning and compassion and drive to help our students to see that they in turn can stretch for amazing and reach for their big dreams. And so you really want to, again, distinguish between committing yourself and really stretching out there and daring mighty things and reaching for the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Really establish an environment where you can feel free to fail. Failure is not a negative thing. Failure is an opportunity for growth. And I have a saying that I love from our office that if we're going to fail, let's fail fast. That way we can see what we need to change and adjust, or if we need to just let go of something. It's really difficult for individuals, and there's psychology behind it, the further you get into something, to let it go, even if it no longer makes sense. I recently read in a book called Essentialism about a man who really wanted to win an Xbox Connect at a carnival. He ended up wasting his entire life savings and never won the Xbox, because the more he invested financially and being in the game, the harder it was for him to walk away, even though logically it did not make sense to keep going forward. He could have just gone to the store, he could have bought an Xbox, but he couldn't let go. And so we have to learn how to let go and embrace our failures and really be able to work with that in our goal setting cycle. And again, as I mentioned with the gentleman from YouTube, if something fails, you should reevaluate and consider rolling it into the next cycle if that makes sense for you in your goal setting process. Really, OKRs are all about working smarter, not harder. They're created in a way that you can start to really see what's important and essential within your advising practices to you, to your team, to the students that you serve, and begin to recognize what you can let go of, what you should focus on so that you can start to achieve greater academic services than you're at right now, but you want to provide. And it really does make a big difference when we can take a step back and have something that's we're passionate about and attached to, and be able to make that the framework of what our why really is as academic advisors and are moving forward. So I promised that I would tell you a story about Operation Crush. So this is Andy Grove. As I mentioned earlier, he's considered the father of OKRs. And Andy Grove really helped to save Intel. So in the 1970s, Intel was still a fairly young company, but they were doing well for themselves, but they were coming into a new market, and Motorola was king at the time. For those of us that really remember that era and how that company was a household name, they were far more than process chips that Intel was working on. I mean, you know, they did radios and they had mobile phones and all of these other things, and they were about ready to introduce their own microprocessing chip. And Intel realized that if Motorola hit the market before them, that they were going to die, that they were not going to make it. And Andy Grove came into the Intel company one day and he said to everyone, I need everyone to understand that bad companies are destroyed by crisis, good companies survive them, and great companies are improved by them. And they were in a crisis situation. He knew that if they could not create a microprocessing chip and get it on the market within 30 days, that they were done for. And so he introduced OKRs to his team. He introduced that to them and said, we got to break down the barriers. And that's where he came into play with breaking down silos. And suddenly the different development teams within Intel realized that they needed to learn more about what each other does in their role and how they could come together and combine their OKRs. And they started to recognize through Operation Crush that they really did have very similar OKRs. And so instead of having them be separate from one another, they got their superpowers together. They started aligning and collaborating with each other on the OKRs that they were going to work with, and they succeeded well beyond anything anyone ever imagined. And as you all know, most of us, if we look at our computers today, there's a little Intel's processing sticker right there, and that all came from this moment when they knew that if they didn't innovate, they were going to die. And OKRs was introduced, and it was a way to set goals that really helped the entire company to focus on what really mattered, and they were able to push forward and succeed. So how can OKRs make a difference in academic advising? They really help us to create a more intentional and focused work environment as academic advisors. We have a lot on our plates, but we are far more than a person that creates an academic plan for a student that comes and sits across the desk from us, right? We're somebody that's there to be a listening ear and a support, to provide resources across your university campus. I can almost guarantee that all of you know how to connect your students with any resource on campus, and that's far beyond what you are listed on your academic advising role typically when you get hired, right? And so you want to be intentional in the services that you're providing, and you want to be meaningful. And OKRs really helps you to narrow down what's important to you and what's important to your stakeholders. It really helps you to have a continuous learning process. It's important for us to be lifelong learners. I just said to someone the other day that a master's degree is only going to take you so far. What's really going to be impactful about that degree is if you're willing to continue to learn far beyond you earning that diploma. If you're willing to be a lifelong learner and continue to build on your best practices and the things that you do. And I believe that's something that we all want. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today at the UAA conference conference with professional development opportunities to learn and grow by. Really measuring and making it personally impactful for yourself, and it really starts to help build relationships between you, your students, your colleagues at the campus, and really helping to build your confidence and recognize that you have strengths that you can bring to your team that will help everyone to be benefited and grow together. The most important thing as an academic advisor, however, when creating OKRs, is to remember to find out what your stakeholders' input is. It's really easy for us to get all excited about programs or ideas that we have, and we run with them, and we never slow down for a moment to stop and think, how is this going to impact my stakeholder? And for us, that's our students. Or how's this going to impact the stakeholder that's the donor to your college? How is this going to impact my student's family in the future? How's this going to impact my colleagues? And so you have different stakeholder levels, with the student being the key. And so you should really take a step back when you're making those OKRs as an academic advisor and ask yourself how what you are planning for is going to make sense and impact those students' lives. So one of the things that came out of OKRs in our office when we first started was our start desk. So in our college, years ago, the business school used to be a very tall brick building, which still exists. I'm standing in it today for my presentation. But over time, and with the wonderful contributions from the Huntsman Foundation, we added on to our building. And so all of a sudden, advising services were being passed by. Where we were in a location previously where students would walk by our office frequently on a daily basis and be able to pop in when they had a quick question, that had shifted and changed with the addition to our building, where classrooms were now housed, and we're on the 3rd floor of a hallway that only has offices, and so we're not getting the foot traffic that we used to. And so because of OKRs, a member of our team actually came up with the Start Desk, which is located in a high traffic area between both buildings of the business college here at USU. And it's a place that is open Monday through Friday during normal business hours. It's manned by student mentors and peer advisors, and occasionally academic advisors and career specialists from our team. Depending on the time of year, we'll go and take a shift down there. And it really started to make an impact on our students and how we were reaching them and touching them. And we started to build stronger relationships with them. We started to see an uptick in advising appointments within our own office throughout the academic year, where there used to be some more lulls. And it's just been a really great experience, and that would not have ever come about if we hadn't sat down as a team and really evaluated what our stakeholders needed, what were they missing, and how could we provide it. And so something really great is understanding that we can flourish both in the pandemic and beyond, and that advising really does have a new era that's coming out of this. We've learned a lot about this. So as you look at this image, of course, we're all, well, really very familiar with Zoom, right? Some of us are very tired of being on Zoom. I am one of them. I am so ready for the day to come when we'll have face-to-face student appointments again. However, I understand and recognize the benefit of Zoom and the reality that Zoom's not going to go away entirely, and that's okay. One of the things that we did for our Start Desk is we opened it up to have a virtual Start Desk. So even though we still had some individuals on campus, it was very limited, and our students had gone all over the country at this point. And so we kept the same business hours, but now students could pop in and meet with anybody in the virtual Start Desk. And so that's really what this image is. It's myself, another academic advisor, one of our peer mentors, and then our staff assistant, and we were all taking shifts within this room. And it was a really wonderful experience to see that we could take what really felt like a frustrating and uncertain time in academic advising and turn it around and readjust how we were providing a service that had manifested out of an OKR. And the way we did that is we reevaluated the OKR that had the Start Desk in there, and then that made the changes for our team. So some of the resources, I'm probably gonna be way ahead of time because I was so nervous about taking too much time. But some of the resources that I would really recommend, again, is reading Measure What Matters. They really do a great job, John Dewar does, about sharing how this works, and not only how it works, but how it's worked for big companies, small companies, individuals, and helping them to better achieve what their personal goals were as an individual and for their companies. He also does a really great TED Talk that I recommend about why the secret of success is setting the right goals. It's not just about having any goal. It really needs to be a goal that makes sense for you and the services that you provide. And then measurewhatmatters.com actually shows samples of various OKRs. You can do live coaching sessions. They have free events and activities to help individuals really start to build and understand how they can take this to their company or their organization and really shape the services that they're providing. I also have done a 2-hour workshop in the past, actually during this academic year, which was really great because we were able to sit down as a conference group and really start to shape individuals' OKRs. And the goal was to just start with one and practice making the objective and the key results for one goal and really see what that felt like and see how you could take that back to your team and then build upon that for yourself. And so that's something that I encourage. And again, I'm going to provide my contact information. And if you'd like to get together and learn more about OKRs, really sit down and practice putting some together, I'm happy to do that as well. But in the meantime, I am ready for questions and answers if there are any. So.
Okay, well, we don't have any at the moment, but if anybody would like to put one into the Q&A, I know there's a little bit of a lag time, so we'll wait. So while we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, Erin, can you give us an example of like one of your OKRs?
Yeah, so actually the example that's in the presentation was one of my original ones, but I just updated my OKRs this week because I'm getting ready for a performance review and I wanted to make sure that they were up to date and ready for the new academic year. And so something that I realized, again, my objective hasn't changed from that original. I really do want to provide student services that promote career development and helping students look beyond graduation. However, I realize as an academic advisor, as crazy as this seems, that I really can't tell my students, and I'm sure we can't, I hope maybe somebody out there might be amazing, but I can't really tell my students exactly what happens in the classroom for specific classes. And so for one of my key results I've actually set myself this year, and I collaborated with the career specialist who matches up with my majors I advise for. My plan is over the next academic year, as a key result, I am going to go and meet with the professors who teach the 4 core classes for my emphases in my program. I want to get a hold of their syllabus to review it, and I plan to sit in their classes, at least for a couple of sessions each, so that I can really start to get a feel and be able to tell my students, this is what's happening in the classroom, this is how it's going to be applicable outside of the classroom, and be able to get them a feel that in hopes that that can help them better really understand that emphasis that they're considering, and is it really something that's part of their career goals for themselves. So that's something that's stretching myself out, and I think not so much in a way that I'm stretching myself because it's this big thing. It's more in terms of time, right? I'm sure that all academic advisors can relate that our time is very precious, and we're student facing, and the majority of that time goes towards being with the students face to face. And so to step away from the office and to sacrifice time, I knew that it had to be a sacrifice that I was making on behalf of the student so that I could be a better academic advisor for them. So.
Great. Thank you, Erin. We have a question here. Okay. What is the consensus building process for when the brainstorming brings up too many great ideas or great goals? How do you narrow it down for a team?
Oh, I really like that. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that when we started doing it in our office, we did do it as a team. And so everybody came with their ideas as a team, and we then began to realize how many things actually overlapped with each other. And so then it became a narrowing down process. So we actually got a really giant whiteboard in our director's office and started writing down things that matched up with each other. And then we were able to start narrowing and see how we could collaborate and combine our goals. I hope that's making sense. Like, combining them in a way that we weren't alone. We weren't, one man on an island. We were a team on that island, and we could connect our objectives with one another, but our key results might be slightly different. And that's where the communication piece came into play for us, and it still does, and we've built on that because with time, you get used to being able to let go. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't maybe jot them down somewhere and keep them on the back burner for when you have space, like you've achieved an objective and you're ready to do something new. That's where that kind of comes into play. But it is tricky, and I know that because you really have to decide what's essential in this moment. What matters most for my students right now, and what's going to be great, but we can hold off on it. And it really helps to be able to collaborate that, not just by yourself, because we could all run down the rabbit hole alone and be like, but it all seems so awesome. It's really like figuring out what matches up with each other and what is really the key essential task to focus on. Was that helpful? I hope that was helpful.
The next question, thank you, Erin. Yeah, the next question is, did you have anyone who was not excited about this process, and did they change their mind as you moved forward?
Yes and yes. So in our office, we did pretty well as a team. I think it was more nervousness of breaking down what used to be the norm for goal setting, and really like looking at how we can change. My team in the advising center did really well, actually. Like it was like slow moving at first, right? You're like, oh, okay, I got another book they want me to read, and I've got to do this thing. But then as we started really getting into it and talking to each other, there was a build of excitement. So it definitely wasn't like out the gate, you're like, woo, Measure What Matters is going to be so awesome, and so, but where I did experience is the hesitation, or those that didn't get on board, was the following year, after the dean's office had seen how much of an impact it had made in our center. They wanted to take that to the next level, and they made it our annual read for everyone in our college. And that's where a lot of pushback I saw came from, and often, not to knock anybody, it was often with faculty, right? They're like, oh, another thing, they want me to do this thing. But I've seen over the last few years the impact it's made for those faculty that started to, like us in the advising center, started to recognize that this really could be a benefit, and they eventually embraced it, even though it was a slow start. And it's really strengthened relationships between us and between them and their students and other departments, where you can still see the ones that have not gotten on board. It's almost like they are hiding away in their office, right? And so you do get to see the black and white of it. And that's where it's really important, like anything that we do, there has to be buy-in, there has to be passion behind it. And so for us, I think it was a huge blessing and a benefit that it started small within our team. It grew to our external relationship, and then it went beyond that, and we were able to build. And we know it works for us. And so even though not everybody is on board, faculty-wise, we know that it functions well, and it keeps our train moving forward. So.
Okay. One last question before we have to end, Erin, is how did you prevent the rewards aspect and the judging when you did not meet an OKR?
Oh, I really like the part of the judging. So the reward part, and again, this is my own, I lucked out. I just have a great director. She knows it. I tell her all the time. So if she happens to be watching, it's no surprise. But is that we already were a center that didn't attach rewards to things. And so for us, that part was easy, but I can see where it's difficult in other settings, because we live in a society where we're wanting the prize, right? And we also live in a society where we are easy to criticize ourselves, or it's easy for us to judge others. And I wish that I had a magic bullet for that, but I don't, because sometimes I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to this, but I know that there's outside judgment as well. And I think it's taking other skills that we learn about self-compassion and about finding a place to become comfortable, letting go of social norms within the United States, because, you know, we have different social norms. I'm not that judging is not a norm in other places, but learning and finding a way to have self-care for yourself and not let the outside voice stop you from keeping to push forward. And I really do wish that I could answer that in a way that I was like, this is what I do, you know, because it's hard sometimes and it doesn't make sense to people. People don't like to be told no, and people don't, you know, they might not think your idea is great, but it's never giving up on yourself. And I think also that's where the quantifying really comes in handy, because if somebody's questioning what you're doing and they're like, well, you can't show that this is working, if you have quantified it in some way, like a percentage goal or a time frame that you're going to accomplish that, and you have proof to show how it's affecting your students, that starts to break down barriers, which I've seen. We've had individuals question what we're doing in our center, and when they start to see the numbers and the data come back and recognize we really are making an impact, they've done a 180 and they've asked for help in their own OKRs. So
that's awesome. I also like that you mentioned the self-compassion, and earlier you talked about how failure is not a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's a learning experience, and I think that's part of it too, is when you don't meet an OKR, it's a learning experience, and you know what you can change, or you brainstorm, I guess, what you can change and move on from there and try again. So yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, everyone. And my contact information is here. Again, if you ever want to reach out, I know it's a lot of information to throw out there in the world, so please don't ever hesitate. And thanks, Kara, so much for moderating today as well.
Yeah. For everybody who's still in attendance, just two quick announcements. Look, the links for next week's sessions. And again, we just have the one session in the morning and then the end note. Or not in the morning. The first session is the different sessions, and then the end note next week. So look for those links in an email early next week. Also, next week we have Wednesday as our day from 12 to 2 for UAA. We are veering from the Thursday norm and going to Wednesday for next week to finish off our UAA conference. Thank you for everybody for attending. Thank you for Erin for presenting. Wonderful job. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Was that okay?
You did so good.